class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Golden Knights, Game 4 of their playoff series in the first round of the 2019 Stanley Cup playoffs, in which the Knights managed to shut out the San Jose Sharks 5-0, and now we'll head back to San Jose with the Golden Knights having a 3-1 series lead. And this game started off as games 2 and 3 started off, and as many games against the Knights have started off in the past, a goal within the first couple of minutes. It was an improvement on the last game technically, as they didn't allow a goal in the first minute of the period. It took about 71 seconds for Max Pacioretty to get one past Martin Jones, who started in this game but did not finish it, and the Golden Knights had the 1-0 lead. The Sharks were then quite dominant, honestly, for the rest of that first period. They were getting multiple power plays off of good pressure. They were getting some great chances off, but some pretty bad luck and some great saves from Marc-Andre Fleury kept the Sharks on the board until Shea Theodore got an opportunity on a breakaway to make it 2-0. Come the start of the second period, Jones was out, Aaron Dell was in a somewhat of a surprise type of pull, I guess I would call it. The Sharks continued to push in that second period, but the Knights get a good chance. It's from Max Pacioretty. Dell thinks he has it in his glove. He does not have it in his glove, and Max Pacioretty on the rebound manages to make it 3-0. The Sharks finished off the second period okay, but once the third period came out, the Sharks sort of just looked deflated emotionally. No momentum for them. They were heavily outplayed in the third period. They were very poorly disciplined in that third period as well, taking multiple penalties. The Knights add a couple of goals, Tuck, when the game was still at least rather in reach in the first few minutes, and then Marchessault in sort of garbage time to make it 5-0. And honestly, there are multiple things I could talk about in this game and throughout this series. Jonas Donskoi stepped in favor of an injured Michael Haley. He actually looked pretty good early on. Joe Thornton was not playing in this one. Radil stepped in for him. He looked okay. Pavelski was moved to center. He looked half decent at center. Maybe there's some hope with Thornton coming back. Erik Karlsson continuing to just look quite bad in the defensive zone, just mostly because of that injury. Brent Burns, since that first game, has gone completely missing, basically. LeBanc had some decent chances. A lot of bad luck for the Sharks, you would think, in this game, especially when you compare it to Game 3, where they probably didn't deserve too many goals. They definitely deserved some in this one, but they just couldn't get any past Fleury. So there are multiple things I could talk about that aren't related to the goaltending, but honestly, there's only really one talking point in this game, in this series thus far, and that is the goaltending and, to a greater extent, Martin Jones. He starts this game. DeBoer decides to go back to his starter after he had been pulled in Game 2, let in 6 goals in Game 3, and he lets in another 2 goals in the first period. And I mentioned in my last review that you have to take a look at these games in a vacuum and take a look at how the goals actually go in, and I said last game Jones wasn't that bad, although he did let in 6 goals. The defense was certainly at fault for those, and tonight the 2 goals actually, from a further out standpoint, again, don't necessarily seem to be Jones's fault, right? Because you take a look at the Pacioretty one, it's a fast shot, a good shot, it's screened. You take a look at the Theodore one, a fantastic breakaway move to get around a couple of players as well as Martin Jones. But it comes down to the point where you're in the playoffs and you need your goaltender to make the saves, to make big saves if you want to actually be able to win games. I've been watching other games in the playoffs. I saw Game 4 of the series between the Lightning and the Blue Jackets. Sergei Bobrovsky limit the Lightning to just 3 goals in that 4th game. He was so good in the first couple of games ever since that first period in the first game, and he was making the big time saves the Blue Jackets needed for them to complete that sweep of one of the league's best teams ever. We've seen Robin Lehner for the New York Islanders in the sweep against the Pittsburgh Penguins, only letting in 1 goal tonight in Game 4. Yes, he had a bit of luck, certainly, but still making some very nice saves to keep the Penguins off the board. We saw last night Nashville versus Dallas. The Nashville Predators giving up over 20 high-danger scoring chances to the Dallas Stars, and Pekka Rinne only letting in 2 goals. And nobody would have blamed either of those any of those 3 goaltenders if they had let in multiple goals in some of these games, because of the fact that they were put in a situation where you might expect that. If Rinne had let in 5 goals on those 20 plus high danger scoring chances, it wouldn't really be a blaming scenario for Rinne. People would be blaming the Nashville defense, and like in a scenario like that, you would probably be blaming the Sharks defense if that occurred. But Rinne comes up big for the Predators, and they're up 2-1 in that series. What does Jones do in that game 3 when the Sharks could have gone up 2-1 in the series? Doesn't come up big. Or I guess maybe I should say game 2 when they could have gone up 2-0 in the series, not the game 3, because that game 3 was a mess. What does he do in game 2? He doesn't come up big. Anytime the Knights got even a decent chance, it's basically through Jones. And again, it happens in this game. As I said, the game starts off Pacioretty. It's a good chance, certainly, but Jones just can't do it for his team. And the Sharks, having a great first period, they come down to the last couple of minutes. Can you at least head to the intermission with just the 1-goal deficit and come back, rejuvenated for the second period, looking to get one past Fleury? No. One more good chance for the Golden Knights, and they score again. Jones still can't come up with a huge save. And Aaron Dell was really maybe marginally better in this game, but still not much. The second period comes along for the Knights, and they still not getting really much of anything besides they did hit a post early in the second period, I believe, from William Karlsson. But eventually they get one good chance, and it's technically a good save from Aaron Dell, but he thought it was a lot better than it was because he thought he had it in his catching mitt, which he did not. And Pacioretty scores, and that was basically a major chance in the second period for the first major chance in the second period for the Golden Knights, and it's led in by Aaron Dell. So it's not necessarily a Jones scenario as much as it is a goaltending scenario for the San Jose Sharks, who just aren't getting the clutch goaltending they needed. I said at the start of this series that the X factor for the Sharks would be Martin Jones. Can he actually perform at a reasonable level? And he's not doing it. He is, in fact, letting the Sharks down. And you have to wonder, in the dressing room, how much faith they still have in Martin Jones, at least at the moment. There are multiple times during the regular season where Jones would string together a couple of bad games, but then he would have a good one, let's say letting in 1 or 2 goals, and the media would inevitably ask a question to the coach and some of the players. Oh, what do you think about Martin Jones's performance tonight? And all of the players and the coach would respond with something like, oh, we've had unwavering faith in him. He's been so good for us in the past. We all have faith in Jones to come up with these big saves and everything like that, blah, 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 blah. And maybe in the regular season that is true because it's the regular season. Who cares, right? If we saw the Tampa Bay Lightning earlier this season, or this day, prove that maybe the regular season doesn't matter that much. But when it comes to the playoffs and it's 1st to 4 in a series, you don't really have that time to say, oh, we have unwavering faith in Martin Jones, because you string together 2 games in a row in which he's just completely not good enough. In games 2 and technically in game 3, I guess you could say as well. Game 4, he did not do well enough either. And you have to wonder if some of these players who are thinking that they have played well enough, because honestly, game 1, they were a much better team. Obviously, they won that one. In game 2, you could argue they were the better team as well, but thanks to Jones, they ended up losing. And in game 4, at least in the first 30-40 minutes of that game, they probably were also the better team and just not rewarded at all for it. Not, of course, 0 goals, you're not going to win anyway if your goaltender is like superb in any regard, but still, definitely deflating to be down 2-0 after such a fantastic first period that you did have. And so a lot of the blame here does have to rest with Martin Jones. Now, am I going to make statements like, oh, the Sharks are stuck with Jones for the next 5 years, this is a complete mess? No, we have seen goaltenders in the past rebound from bad years. Carey Price, Robin Lehner was never really that good until this season. We've seen it from Braden Holtby. Terrible regular season last season before he came back in the playoffs. As we have seen it before, goaltenders are very weird when it comes to these types of things, but it does come down to the fact that Martin Jones has not been good enough in the regular season this season. He has not been good enough in the playoffs. I do have to wonder whether or not he even gets the start in what could potentially be the Sharks' final game of the year on Thursday against the Golden Knights in that Game 5, because while I said Dell was maybe only marginally better, at this point, I guess, what do you have to lose? Jones has now proven over the last 3 starts that starting him is not like it's some sort of like advantage for the San Jose Sharks, so why not start Aaron Dell? It can't go any worse than it has with Martin Jones at this point, so I'm not saying Dell should start. I would not be upset if Jones started, but I also wouldn't even be upset if Dell actually did find himself between the pipes for the first minute of the game, which happened to be very pivotal for the San Jose Sharks, as the Golden Knights have scored 3 times in the first, I guess I should say, 80 seconds of the game. But at the moment, we've seen in the past that goaltending is very important when it comes to winning Stanley Cups. I can't remember the last time a bad goaltender won, even in 2016, 2017 when the Pittsburgh Penguins won. I don't think Matt Murray is a great goaltender, but he was good in those playoffs. You'd probably have to go back to maybe 2010 with Antti Niemi for the last time, and even then he had to actually show up big at times. For instance, any Sharks fans remembering that would probably remember the Sharks getting swept by the Blackhawks in 2010 in that third round for nothing. And Niemi actually had to be very good in some of those games to prevent the Sharks from getting a win at all there. And Jones just not coming up big at all for the San Jose Sharks. When you look around the league, other teams' goaltenders are doing that very thing. It comes to Jones and you're saying, yeah, the defense is not playing well. Yeah, Karlsson, yeah, Burns are both playing quite bad defensively. But Jones is doing zero favors for this team, and it is quite disappointing to see potentially a great year with a great group of players being lost, not entirely on Jones, but heavily on the back of the Sharks goaltending. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks, as I said, the series is not over, as they'll be back in action on Thursday for Game 5 in San Jose against the Golden Knights. But it's not really a great feeling at the moment. Just these past 3 games have not inspired confidence in the San Jose Sharks, and I really haven't felt this bad about how a series has been going since maybe even 2014 when the Sharks were actually reversed swept. You know, by about Game 7, going into Game 7, I had a pretty sinking feeling that the Kings were going to end up pulling that series out. But since then, 2016, 2017, 2018, never really felt that. Even in 2016 when the Penguins defeated the Sharks in the Stanley Cup Finals, because of how well Jones was playing, I did not think the Sharks were out of it until they were actually losing and lost. In 2017 against the Oilers, even when the Sharks were down 3-2, I did not think going into Game 6 that the Sharks were going to lose that series. Even against the Golden Knights last year, in what was, not necessarily the closest possible series, although the Sharks played them decently well, going into that Game 6, I still didn't think that series was anywhere close to over. But now going into the Game 5, the way the Sharks have really performed, or at least the way Jones has made it so the Sharks have performed in these past 3 games, does not inspire a lot of confidence. So I haven't given up hope just yet. But the Sharks are definitely going to have to prove me wrong, and Jones or Dell or whoever gets the start at this point, Bibeau from the San Jose Barracuda, who cares at this point, right? Someone is going to have to show something, some sort of effort in nets to get me, and I'm sure many, many, many other Sharks fans back on board with this team and going into a potential Game 6 if they actually do manage to win Game 5. Class dismissed.